Our families were well matched, and we were of a suitable age. So Calvin and I entered into an arranged marriage, but he had a childhood sweetheart, and I had an unforgettable first love. His childhood sweetheart betrayed him, and my first love let me down too. After marriage, we cooperated seamlessly, becoming the model couple in our social circle. However, both the childhood sweetheart and the first love started to realize their mistakes, filled with endless regret. Yet, there's a saying, feelings are hard to control, and fake turns into real. Chapter 1. It was just 1 month before my engagement to Calvin when we first met formally. Calvin chose a restaurant on the top floor of a riverside building in Jincheng, overlooking the night view of the Bund. As I rushed over after work, my best friend Alicia texted me, "I've asked around. Calvin seems like someone you can get along with." When I arrived, Calvin was on a work call, his black shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Speaking in German, he gave me an apologetic smile when he saw me, but I waved it off, signaling that it was fine. Calvin talked for 10 minutes, and in those 10 minutes, my mind wandered. One thought was that Calvin had apparently studied his undergraduate degree in Germany, supposedly because of his first love. Another was that today, he wasn't wearing his sleeve garters. His shirt didn't have the same buttoned-up restraint as before, but there was an air of casual ease. Speaking of the sleeve garters, I thought back to the first time we met after he returned to the country. At his horse ranch in the suburbs, he was wearing both sleeve garters and a harness, his biceps and chest muscles bulging beneath them. My first thought at the time was, this is the best-looking man I've ever seen in sleeve garters and a harness. He dismounted his horse, walked toward me, and the first thing he said was, "Hello, Miss Lee," Calvin said, now off the phone, smiling. "I'm Calvin." Chapter 2. To my surprise, Calvin and I got along really well. He was a man of maturity and elegance in every way, from the dishes he ordered, to the topics we discussed, to the flowers he gave me after dinner. Every detail was perfectly comfortable and thoughtful. We maintained a respectful distance while also sharing a mutual understanding of intimacy. But if we didn't get a bit closer soon, it would be too late, after all. We were getting engaged very soon. After dinner, Calvin drove me home. He was driving a massive off-road vehicle, and I struggled a bit to get in. Calvin offered his hand to help me into the car. Speaking with a touch of embarrassment, I was inspecting the base today. This car is more convenient for that. After graduating, he left the Wang family's traditional fast-moving consumer goods business and started his own biotech company. I teased him. It must be hard for President Wang to be so busy and still make time for dinner with me. "You shouldn't say that," Calvin said seriously. "You're busy with work too. This is something I should be doing." I stared into Calvin's deep eyes for a few seconds, then sent a message to Alicia. "Mature men are terrifying." Humph. Now you know how great mature men are? What did you even like before? I had no rebuttal, considering I used to only date guys younger than me. Young, energetic puppy boys are certainly nice, but too much energy can be exhausting. Chapter 3. When we got to my apartment building, I was stopped by one of those exhausting puppy boys. His name was Lucas. We had been entangled with each other since our time studying abroad in North America, and we'd gotten back together once after I returned home. My personality is such that I can give second chances, and I don't mind rekindling old flames, so calling him my unforgettable first love isn't unfair. He was indeed the person I'd been in a relationship with the longest. Before I could get out of the car, Calvin noticed Lucas leaning against his motorcycle outside my apartment. But Calvin had a different perspective. His first reaction was, "That man looks suspicious. Is the security around here that bad?" I stayed silent for a few seconds and decided to tell the truth. "That's my ex-boyfriend." Calvin paused. "Sorry. Would you like me to give you some space?" His skill level was really high. "No need. This will only take a few minutes," I replied. "I was actually going to invite you up for a drink. If you don't mind, we can reschedule." Calvin frowned. "He's seen you." Lucas had indeed spotted me, and his previously pitiful expression turned sour when he saw the car and Calvin. His tone wasn't exactly friendly as he asked, "Sis, who's that?" Calvin raised an eyebrow at his words. Chapter 4. I suddenly felt a headache coming on. Lucas is 5 years younger than me, And because I'm older, I've always been overly indulgent and doting toward him. My friends often complained, Lucas is the way he is now because you spoiled him. Impulsive, full of youthful energy, extreme in both good and bad. I remember, 2 months ago, we already broke up. I was preparing for the F1 race back then, training at the base. Lucas replied with some dissatisfaction. Who is this guy anyway? My fiancé. I responded coldly. That's Lucas for you. Completely spoiled by me. He probably didn't take the breakup I mentioned 2 months ago seriously. After all, we'd gotten back together once before, and he was confident in his ability to win my favor. Did you cheat on me? Lucas asked incredulously. Are you really using this excuse just to spite me? A wave of anger surged up in me, and just as I was about to cut things off quickly, Calvin, who had been silent, finally spoke up. Excuse me, sir. You should have received a basic education and possess some level of comprehension skills, Calvin said as he stepped out of the car and stood in front of me. Chloe clearly said in her first sentence that the breakup was 2 months ago. Calvin, standing at 187 centimeters and with years of fitness behind him, made Lucas look incredibly small in comparison. He slightly shielded me, continuing, spreading baseless rumors about cheating. Where are your manners? Lucas took a step back, wisely avoiding a confrontation with Calvin, which was typical of his cleverness. He simply looked at me with reddened eyes, biting his lip and softening his tone as he asked, Sis? I replied, he's my fiancé. We're getting engaged next month. Chapter 5. The main reason Lucas and I had lasted so long was that he knew exactly how to make me happy. In the past 2 years, we'd never had a real argument. No matter how angry I got, Lucas would always smile and coax me. This led to our conflicts never being addressed, let alone resolved. We both agreed to break up. I said, if you don't believe me, you can check our chat history. Lucas looked hurt. This was the first time I had ever been so cold to him. I sighed, realizing I still had a soft spot for him when he looked like that. Lucas gave me one last long look, choking back his words as he warned, you'd better not regret this. His natural pride would never allow him to linger. He turned and got on his motorcycle. As the roar of the engine faded into the distance, I turned to Calvin, embarrassed. Sorry you had to witness that. Calvin shook his head and hesitated before saying, regarding relationships, I'm sure you've heard a bit about mine as well. I nodded. Compared to my string of boyfriends and constant rumors, Calvin's only known romantic entanglement had been with his ex-girlfriend Amelia. Are you still in contact with her? I asked. Calvin smiled wryly and shook his head. After what happened 4 years ago, we haven't spoken since. So that's it? Every adult has had a relationship or two. It's not like we're talking about promiscuity. I thought for a moment and added with a grin, though you've probably heard about my reputation too. My relationship history is more than just a couple of flings. Does that bother you? Don't say that. There's no issue of being bothered or not, Calvin said, looking at me seriously. You've always taken every relationship seriously. In fact, through my work, I've come across some of your ex-boyfriends. Calvin's words were genuine. In casual conversation, they all spoke highly of you. You're a very interesting person. Honestly, I worry I might be too boring for you. Wow, mature men are truly terrifying. Had I known older men were this attractive, why on earth would I have ever been called a younger guy slayer? Chapter 6. That night, Calvin didn't come up to my apartment. As he was leaving, he simply draped his suit jacket over my shoulders, covering the straps of my slip dress. The jacket carried a cool, understated scent, much like Calvin, calm, collected, and effortlessly elegant. Alicia was amazed by this gesture. That's some high-level play. I asked, what do you mean? He's subtly scheduling your next meeting. If you're not interested, you'll forget about it, and he'll know how to approach you. But if you do want to see him again, you'll definitely return his jacket. As I was walking toward Calvin's office with his freshly cleaned jacket in hand, I couldn't help but think, you've got all the tricks to handle younger guys. But with Calvin, Alicia warned, you'd better stay sharp. When I arrived at Calvin's office building, it was just before quitting time. Calvin texted me, and I took his private elevator to his floor. The receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. Mr. Wang's meeting will end in about 10 minutes. Miss Lee, please wait for a moment. I looked around Calvin's office. It was sleek and understated, but certain items on his desk and shelves hinted at his personal tastes. For example, there was a Nintendo Switch, a pool cue mounted on the wall, and a DSLR camera on the bookshelf. After 10 minutes, Calvin finished his meeting and walked over with an elegantly wrapped bouquet of Earl Grey roses in hand. The roses bloomed boldly and confidently. Calvin bent down and handed them to me as I sat on the sofa. Sorry for the wait. These flowers are my apology. I hope you like them. Chapter 7. How high are Amelia's standards if even Calvin wasn't good enough for her? Why are you suddenly so curious? Amelia's complicated. She's both insecure and proud. If she'd been more open, your marriage with Calvin wouldn't even be happening. Can you do me a favor? Find out what really happened between Calvin and Amelia. As I tapped my phone screen on the way to the restaurant, reading over my conversation with Alicia, I couldn't help but think. The relationship between Amelia and Calvin had been quite famous in our social circles back in the day. Amelia had entered Calvin's international high school as an exceptional student, and the two of them fell in love. However, the vast difference in their family backgrounds led to strong opposition from both sides. I'd even heard about it during high school when I was preparing to study abroad. Calvin had gone to university in Germany because of Amelia. Tuition was cheaper, and Amelia had applied there. Later, Calvin fought his family to be with her, leaving the Wang family business to start his own. His early ventures didn't go smoothly. One of my ex-boyfriends, who had worked with Calvin, told me how the young master of the Wang family had chosen a difficult path instead of the easy one. Once Calvin's business had taken off and the Wang family finally relented, Amelia broke up with him. Apparently, it was a nasty breakup, far from amicable. This was also something my ex had mentioned. I glanced at Calvin, who was backing the car into a parking space. It was hard to imagine this always calm, collected, and gracious man as a young, reckless rebel. My phone buzzed, and a message from Alicia popped up. I found out it wasn't just a breakup. Amelia took Calvin's core project team and jumped ship to a rival company. She then got together with Joel, the rival's operations director. I was speechless. This girl was even more ruthless than me. Chapter 8. Calvin chose a local cuisine restaurant, and he was the one who ordered the dishes. After hearing his choices, I was surprised to find that, after our last dinner, Calvin had already figured out my taste in food. Calvin, however, acted as if it were no big deal. It's nothing really. If you pay attention, you can remember anything. I took a sip of my drink to hide my emotions. I had never experienced this kind of care from Lucas. Being the older one, I was always the one who made the decisions when it came to ordering food. The conversation over dinner flowed naturally, confirming that neither of us was forcing the interaction. Calvin and I were very much in sync, whether it was our values or our interests. We talked about everything, from Nintendo to work, and Calvin surprised me again by knowing quite a bit about my current work situation. I thought you wouldn't be interested in fashion design, I said, feeling a bit guilty because I hadn't paid as much attention to his work. To toot my own horn, Calvin said with a smile as he clinked glasses with me. I've got pretty good taste. He certainly did. From his fashion sense to his choices in flowers and restaurants, Calvin's aesthetic could definitely be described as sophisticated. The meal was thoroughly enjoyable, and afterward, Calvin handed me a small blue silk box. I bought this while on a business trip. It reminded me of you. I hope you like it. I opened it to find a sapphire bracelet that sparkled brilliantly in the light. I put it on right away, but the clasp was too delicate. Calvin leaned in to help fasten it for me. I smiled and linked my arm through his. Thank you. I love it. Calvin chuckled, revealing the dimple on his right cheek. Even as we stepped out of the elevator, I was still admiring the bracelet. Calvin, a little regretful, said, if I'd known you'd like it this much, I should have gotten the matching necklace too. Before I could respond, an excited female voice called out ahead of us. Calvin? Beside me. Calvin froze for a moment. Then his smile disappeared. Miss Wu. Chapter 9. Amelia was petite, with delicate features, dressed in a sleek gray business suit, and exuded an air of sharp professionalism. She was undeniably attractive, but the smile on her face quickly faded when she saw me holding Calvin's arm, though she quickly replaced it with a polite grin. She glanced at me. "And this is?" I raised an eyebrow. "Interesting." Instead of pleasantries, her first reaction was to ask who I was. Amelia's behavior didn't quite match the cold, heartless woman from the breakup rumors. It seemed she still had feelings for Calvin. I let my wrist drop slightly, allowing the sapphire bracelet to slide into view, and said with a smile, "Hello, I'm Chloe, Calvin's fiancée." Amelia's smile vanished entirely. She looked at Calvin in disbelief, her voice rising to a sharp pitch. "You're engaged?" Calvin responded with a calm adding, "We're getting engaged next month. As for the wedding, we'll need more time to prepare. It's a big deal after all." I tugged at Calvin's sleeve, signaling my approval of his words. Amelia lowered her head, brushing her hair back. When she looked up again, her expression was stiff but still composed. "Is that so?" she asked softly. "Here for a meal? I remember we used to love the food here. I haven't been in a while. I wonder if the flavors changed." I couldn't help but chuckle. Calvin glanced at me, then gently squeezed the hand I had looped through his arm in a reassuring gesture. "I come here often with friends, so I've grown accustomed to it. Haven't really noticed if the taste has changed." Calvin replied smoothly, "But the local dishes are still excellent. My fiancée is a local, and she prefers spicy food. She just returned to the country, so I brought her here to treat her." As he spoke, I watched Amelia, and I realized that a person's face could truly lose all color. "Well then, I won't disturb you," Amelia said as Calvin nodded politely. "We'll be heading off now," he said. Chapter 10. The drive back was filled with silence. It wasn't until we reached my apartment building that Calvin, with his hands resting on the steering wheel, exhaled. "I'm sorry if I upset you." I looked up at him, surprised. "I'm not upset." I paused, then decided to be honest. "Okay, maybe a little, but not because of Amelia. It's because you seemed down the whole way back." "My mood had nothing to do with Amelia," Calvin said, running a hand over his face. "If I still had feelings for her, I wouldn't be engaged to you. It's just that." His voice lowered. "Seeing her brings back bad memories." Tentatively, I reached out and held Calvin's hand, gently rubbing his fingers. "I owe you an apology. I had someone look into why you and Amelia broke up." "There's no need to apologize. It's common knowledge," Calvin said, squeezing my hand and intertwining our fingers. "Even if you hadn't, I would have been honest with you later." I couldn't help but laugh. "Then why did she do what she did?" "I have no idea," Calvin said with a bitter smile. "Maybe she hated me. We were together for 2 years, always breaking up and getting back together. The relationship brought more pain than joy because of my family and her mother's interference. Even now, when I look back, it was mostly shouting matches. In the later stages, she pitted me for cutting ties with the Wong family to suffer through hardship. But after she cried, she'd curse me. And after cursing me, she'd come hug me." Calvin was lost in his memories. "We studied the same major, so naturally. We started a business together. She was incredibly talented, everyone acknowledged that. But she always said she couldn't showcase her value in my company. That people only thought she got her position because of me. I'd give her gifts, and if they were expensive, she'd make snide remarks. If they were cheap or if I didn't give her anything, she'd say I didn't care about her." Calvin turned to me with a slight smile. "I guess I didn't do enough. I didn't give her enough security." Chapter 11. I waved our clasped hands. "You're telling your fiancé that you didn't give your ex enough security?" For the first time, Calvin's face displayed such a range of emotions, frustration and panic. "That's not what I meant." I laughed. "I know. I'm teasing you. Did she really jump ship to your rival company?" "It's true." Calvin paused. "At that time, my family had already relented, but I hesitated. Our relationship wasn't healthy, and we had a major disagreement over a critical project. She was fixated on that disagreement, needing me to acknowledge her viewpoint. It stopped being about the project and became more about venting emotions." I listened quietly. "That project failed in the bid against our rival company, and I decided to restructure the upper management and took a 2-week break. And after that," Calvin said, glancing down at our intertwined hands. You know the rest. I asked softly. Why do you think she did it? She told me she was jealous of me, Calvin said after a moment of silence. Jealous of how easily things came to me. She said I trampled on her dignity. Don't think like that, I said, releasing his hand and unbuckling my seatbelt. Leaning over to hug him. We've talked about it now, so let's never bring it up again. In Calvin's embrace, I could smell the familiar cool scent. His size made me feel small and snug against him. I rose slightly and kissed him on the nose. A kiss to make the bad feelings go away. The tips of Calvin's ears slowly turned red. He lowered his gaze, his long lashes trembling slightly. Just the nose? Chapter 12. Damn it. For the umpteenth time, I thought. Calvin is such a terrifying man. I lay on the couch, texting Alicia. Kissing a mature man is something else, gentle, gradual, like being slowly devoured. Alicia's reply was cold. Innocent me doesn't want to hear this. You hypocrite. Weren't you the one who told me your ex-boyfriend was too fast last time? As we traded banter, Calvin sent me a message saying he'd gotten home safely. He then asked if I was free next week to discuss the details of our engagement venue and outfits. I immediately checked my schedule and saw I had boxing practice next weekend. I asked my assistant to move the appointment and told him I was available. Calvin replied with a cute, fluffy cartoon cat emoji, with the words okay popping up over the cat's head. I paused for a second, then covered my face and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed again. Calvin had sent another message. I really did take you to that restaurant because I wanted to treat you, not because of Amelia. I couldn't stop laughing, lying back on the couch. For me, this was such a rare feeling, but it didn't matter. After all, Calvin clearly cared just as much. How wonderful it is when affection is genuinely mutual. Chapter 13. I had imagined Calvin and me picking out a wedding dress together, choosing a honeymoon destination, and designing our wedding rings, but I hadn't expected Calvin to have opinions even about my nails. I was utterly shocked. Aren't there supposed to be differences between men and women? Beauty is universal, don't you think? Calvin said gently, holding my hand. His hand was much larger than mine, easily enveloping it. And besides, I want to understand the things you like. I covered my face with my other hand and mumbled, You're too much, Calvin. Calvin tilted his head, a bit confused, but still smiled at me. I don't usually do my nails anyway, I said, shaking our clasped hands. I box, so long nails are really inconvenient. At that moment, I saw clear joy and excitement in Calvin's deep eyes. I had a feeling you worked out. Your body is healthy and beautiful. Calvin kissed the back of my hand and looked up at me. How about adding boxing to our dates? I've been boxing for years. We didn't wait for the future. After finalizing the wedding attire, we went straight to a boxing gym. Well, calling it a gym isn't quite right. It was a high-end fitness club with strict membership requirements. I had applied when I first returned to the country but was rejected. Calvin wrapped my hands for me, and when I complained, he seemed a bit embarrassed, whispering, Sorry, I let you in through the back door. I was momentarily confused. Calvin rubbed his nose. I'm an investor. I co-founded it with a friend from grad school. I was completely smitten by his sheepishness, so I reached out with my wrapped hand and scratched his chin. Well, thank you, President Wong. Chapter 14. Boxing with Calvin was exhilarating. He was an excellent sparring partner, though I was no match for him in terms of strength or stamina. Calvin kept praising my punches. I was confident in my skills, but even I couldn't handle that much flattery. During a break, Calvin introduced me to Marco, his longtime friend and co-owner of the club. Calvin's friends all had strong boundaries and were easy to get along with. After our introductions, Marco said, I've heard about you for years. Now that we've met, I see the reputation is well-deserved. How is it possible to be so sincere without sounding insincere? While Marco and Calvin discussed the club's operations, I took the opportunity to shower, giving them some space. When I came back, I noticed an unexpected guest. Amelia was there, dressed in workout gear, handing a bottle of water to Calvin. I was holding a water bottle for Calvin myself, and after a brief hesitation, I quietly stepped forward. Did you come alone? Amelia lowered the hand holding the water, her tone laced with self-mockery. You won't even accept a bottle of water from me anymore? I'm here with Chloe, Calvin said, not looking up as he unwrapped his hands, his demeanor clearly indifferent. Really? Are you teaching her to box as well? No need. Chloe's been practicing for years. She's quite good. I couldn't help but smile. I remember when we used to come here on weekends, and you'd teach me how to box, Amelia said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. I was terrible, no matter how much I tried. That's because you never had a workout routine. Naturally, you wouldn't be good at boxing, Calvin responded mildly. Joel could teach you now. He's pretty good. Amelia's face went pale instantly. Chapter 15. Calvin, do you hate me? I wouldn't say that. Calvin turned and saw me, then smiled. He looked back at Amelia and said, Miss Wu, my fiancé is here. We'll be leaving now. Calvin grabbed his gloves and walked over to me. And as he did, Amelia and I made brief eye contact over his shoulder. Suddenly, she raised her voice. Calvin, what was all those years together even about? Calvin took the water bottle from me and replied, It was just foolishness. I couldn't help but giggle and stuck out my tongue. Calvin wrapped his arm around my shoulder, and we walked away together. Marco said he'll treat us to dinner later. Do you like Cantonese food? That sounds great, I said. I'm sorry. By the way, I eavesdropped on your conversation. What do you mean, eavesdrop? You were listening openly, Calvin said, smiling with his dimple showing again. Marco was worried you might misunderstand when you came back and saw Amelia. But that's all cleared up now. For some reason, at that moment, he reminded me of a cat proudly flicking its tail. Dinner was delightful. As we were leaving, Marco added me on WeChat and invited me into their group chat. I looked at the group members, a little surprised. Leo is your childhood friend too? Leo's younger brother was my ex, and we had quite the dramatic breakup back in the day. I felt a little guilty. Calvin nodded, then realized what I meant. His brother went to high school abroad. I didn't have much contact with him. I studied his expression. Are you feeling uncomfortable? To be honest, a little, Calvin admitted, holding my hand. But they're your past, and I'm your future. I'll do my best to make sure you never regret it. Chapter 16. The engagement banquet was set at a seaside hotel. The day before, our families had dinner together. The two families had long-standing business ties and got along well. After the meal, Calvin's mother placed the jade bracelet she had worn for years onto my wrist. It was incredibly valuable, both in price and sentiment. She gently caressed my face and smiled. You two, take care of each other. After seeing our families off, Calvin and I stayed at the seaside hotel. After showering, we sat in our pajamas playing Super Mario. Halfway through the game, I rested my head on Calvin's lap, and his leg muscles tensed before relaxing again. I turned my head to face his stomach and burst out laughing. Calvin looked helpless. Panda, you're getting bolder. Panda was my childhood nickname because I was as round as a ball back then. My family had called me that during dinner, and Calvin had picked it up. Blushing with embarrassment, I reached out to pinch his abs. Calvin leaned back, falling onto the carpet. I climbed on top of him. You don't like it? Saying I don't would be a lie, Calvin said, wrapping his arms around me. It just feels like things are moving fast. I poked his chest. Why did you agree to the arranged marriage in the first place? Calvin took my hand, looking into my eyes. I don't want to upset you, but I want to be honest. At first, it just seemed like a good match. My last relationship was exhausting. It felt like the whole world was against us, and my immaturity hurt my parents. He squeezed my fingers. I just wanted something stable that both our families would approve of. When our parents first proposed the idea, I had already seen you once at my ranch. Calvin continued. You had just returned to the country and immediately picked the wildest horse. I watched from the second-floor terrace as you tamed it. Chloe, you're captivating. Calvin lowered his gaze and gently kissed my fingertips. You're fit, full of life, and every day with you feels worthwhile. I felt my face slowly turning red. Calvin kissed my forehead. Panda, this is the best decision I've ever made. Chapter 17. The engagement party went smoothly. Calvin's company released an announcement congratulating us, and our circles of friends began to overlap. The only unexpected incident was Lucas showing up at the engagement party. That young man, still a bit clueless, barged into the dressing room and asked me if I'd run away with him. Everyone in the room immediately face-palmed in disbelief. "I know you're only doing this because it's a family-arranged marriage," Lucas said, deeply pained. "I'm sorry. I was too immature before. I didn't understand your struggles. Sis, let's run away together." Lucas grabbed my hand. "Let's abandon everything and start our own little family. We'll live a simple and happy life." Me, Alicia, standing with her arms crossed, laughed. "Little brother, your current goal is to get your college diploma. Your next task is to secure a spot for graduate school." Everyone in the room burst out laughing. I sighed in exasperation. "Lucas, I've had a great time these past 2 years. Truly. But we're over. Part of it is the arranged marriage. Yes. But another part is that I like Calvin. Do you understand?" My gaze was gentle, but my words were harsh. "It's time for you to grow up." After Lucas left, Alicia was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "Serves him right. I told you this would happen when you dated someone barely out of their teens." I covered my face. "Don't remind me. I must have been out of my mind back then." Calvin likely knew about the incident. But that's the thing with mature men, they know what's worth asking and what isn't. Or perhaps, Calvin simply didn't view Lucas as a threat. After placing the engagement ring on my finger, he lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss there. Calvin smiled at me. "I'll make you happy forever." Chapter 18. After the engagement, I moved into Calvin's downtown apartment. Calvin was a man who valued quality of life and had a strong sense of personal boundaries. That was the first impression his meticulously designed 50th floor apartment gave me. The second impression was that Calvin was clearly used to living alone. But I was about to change that. Calvin dragged my luggage into the walk-in closet. "The cleaning service comes 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, while we're at work, so they won't disturb us. I've already asked them to clear out half the space for you. Take a look and see how you want to arrange your clothes." Calvin sat on the armrest of the sofa, pulling me close by the hand. "I've lived here alone for 4 years since breaking up with Amelia. Other than me and the cleaning service, no one else has ever been here." His eyes were warm as he looked into mine. "So don't feel uncomfortable." I stepped forward, wrapped my arms around his neck, and kissed him. Living together was easier than I'd expected. Calvin had thoughtfully stocked up on all the skincare products and personal items I used. We both had similar habits, no bad ones to clash over, and we both liked planning and keeping things organized. The only small issue was our sleeping styles. I was a wild sleeper. The first morning, I woke up with my leg draped over Calvin's waist. He had dark circles under his eyes, clearly having had a rough night because of me. But it was easily fixed. Calvin held me by the waist, and my wild sleeping position became much more restrained. I also discovered one of Calvin's adorable little habits. He liked to sleep in, especially after a late night of work. He had trouble getting up the next morning. When I pinched his nose to wake him up, he'd scrunch his face and burrow under the covers, mumbling, "Just 2 more minutes." I was so charmed that I blurted out, "You're such a little lazy pig." The moment I said it, I regretted it. Calvin was a 187 centimeters tall, mature, and steady man, not the younger puppy boy types I'd dated before. Calling him that seemed out of place. But then, I saw Calvin's ears slowly turn bright red. In a muffled voice, he asked, "Is that how you used to sweet-talk your ex-boyfriends?" I quickly replied, "From now on, I'll only sweet-talk you." It dawned on me that he actually liked it. Chapter 19. A month after the engagement, Lucas, who had calmed down after causing a scene at the engagement party, suddenly started acting up again. This included tearful apologies to our mutual friends for his past immaturity, daily deliveries of flowers to my door, and even bold declarations that he intended to win me back. I was sweating bullets, for the first time regretting my past relationships. How had I managed to let this one get so attached? Alicia teased me. "I told you this would happen when you started dating him. Now you're getting a taste of what it's like to be pestered by a clingy kid." The situation with Lucas was escalating. and I was preparing to take more drastic measures to cut things off for good. But just as I was about to act, Lucas stopped. I thought for a moment and decided to ask Calvin about it. "It's nothing serious," Calvin said, sipping his coffee. "He's interning at a friend's company. I thought I'd let him experience the harsh realities of the working world." "Me? What's the matter?" Calvin's voice softened. "Are you feeling sorry for him?" I didn't respond, instead taking his coffee and sipping it. "Babe, why does your coffee taste so sour?" Calvin turned his head to the side. I couldn't help but laugh as I sat on his lap, wrapping my arms around him and kissing his cheek. "Thank you, Calvin." "No, I'm not worried about him. I care more about you." Calvin's dimple appeared faintly as I kissed it. "Babe, you're the cutest." My adorable Calvin kissed me for a solid 20 minutes, leaving me breathless. What I didn't expect was that just as my problem with Lucas was resolved, Calvin's troubles began. Amelia came directly to me. We met at a cafe after I rushed over from work. The first thing Amelia said as she sat down was, "Miss Lee, you're enjoying Calvin's maturity and gentleness now, but have you ever considered that his gentleness is something I taught him?" Chapter 20. I hadn't even had a chance to take a sip of my coffee before I burst out laughing. Amelia's face darkened. "What's so funny?" "Woo. Before I met you, people always described you as insecure and arrogant." I took a sip of my coffee. I used to wonder how such contradictory words could describe the same person. But now that I've met you, I finally understand. Of course. How could I compare to someone like you? A lady born into privilege with a prestigious background? Amelia sneered. "If I had your status, you wouldn't even be in the picture." Did Calvin not stand by your side? He fought against his usually harmonious family for you, made countless sacrifices. And what did you give him in return? I asked gently, but the truth in my words was harsh. You stole his work, betrayed his loyalty and love, and left him with nothing but betrayal. Amelia, do you lack ability? Hardly. You were the top scorer in the city on your entrance exams. Got scholarships to study both undergrad and grad in Germany, setting aside everything else. I actually admire you. I never judge other people's relationships because love is complicated, and unless you're involved, you can never truly understand it. I set my coffee down. But Amelia, what you said today makes me feel that Calvin was too good for you. Calvin's gentleness and maturity weren't taught by you. It's in his nature. He has a greater capacity for empathy than most people. His excellent family upbringing shaped him, and life's challenges have made him introspective and self-aware. He's grown into the man he is today not because of anyone else, but because he never gave up on himself during the hard times. Amelia's face went pale, but she said nothing. In your relationship, the one who suffered the most was always Calvin. You know that deep down. I grabbed my bag and stood up. Goodbye. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt an odd mix of emotions. My phone buzzed, and a message from Calvin appeared at the top of my screen, a cute cat emoji, its tail wagging, asking why I hadn't picked him up from work yet. I smiled. I had left work early today so I could pick him up. I replied to his message and stopped by a nearby florist to order a bouquet of white roses. I could already imagine the look of surprise on his face when I handed him the flowers. Chapter 21. As I stepped into the elevator, holding the large bouquet of white roses, it was right during rush hour. When I walked into the lobby, all eyes turned toward me. I was momentarily taken aback by the attention, quietly pondering whether it was just the striking roses or something else. Occasionally, when I made eye contact with the staff, I'd receive kind smiles in return. It wasn't until I reached Calvin's office floor that I understood why. The company posted the engagement announcement on the website. Calvin's secretary explained with a smile. On the day of the engagement, the company even handed out red envelopes to all the staff. I asked her, "How much did you get?" She made a gesture, grinning. "Thanks to you." I laughed. "I'll give you another one at the wedding, this time. From me personally. Thank you in advance." She graciously brought me a cup of coffee. There was a last-minute issue with the branch. Otherwise, Calvin would have already finished for the day. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting." I waited for about half an hour before Calvin finally emerged, visibly tired. When he saw me, his guilt was written all over his face. "We agreed to meet, and yet I made you wait so long." "Work is like that. I said, sitting on the couch with my arms open. Come here and give me a hug. Calvin let out a sigh, then leaned his full weight on me, burying his head in my neck. With one hand, I struggled to lift the bouquet of white roses from the side of the couch, teasing him. Here, these are for you. Feel better, babe. No exaggeration, Calvin's eyes literally lit up at that moment. His lashes were long and thick, fluttering softly as he smiled with dimples showing, saying he loved them. Oh my goodness! Dating Calvin was like experiencing the best of both worlds, the maturity of a grown man and the charm of a puppy-like lover. Chapter 22. With just a bouquet of flowers, Calvin was completely won over. He's usually so composed. But during dinner, I could sense an undercurrent of restlessness. That restlessness peaked when I mentioned that Amelia had come to see me. I recounted our conversation truthfully, and after a long silence, Calvin said, "Panda, I'm not as good as you think I am." I looked into his eyes. Calvin, you're exactly as good as I think you are. That night, for the first time, Calvin drove home faster than usual. As we approached the apartment, I asked him to stop by a nearby convenience store. Calvin's grip on the steering wheel tightened nervously. He seemed to understand what I was hinting at. I smiled. Are you sure you don't want to stop? Even in the dim light of the car, I saw Calvin's ears turn red. He pressed his fist to his mouth and, in a slightly embarrassed voice, said, "I've been prepared since our engagement." Facing my amused gaze, Calvin lowered his eyes. I wanted everything to be perfect. I made sure everything was top quality. I stifled a laugh and nodded. Of course. Only the finest for President Wong. Hand in hand, we headed upstairs. Calvin's palm was warm, and to be honest, so was mine. Fingerprint access. Open door. Closed door. The next second, Calvin had me pinned against the wall, showering me with kisses, passionate, gentle, all-consuming, and filled with love. Every way Calvin loved me was expressed through that kiss. We stumbled our way toward the bedroom, like two teenagers spinning in a world of pure emotion. But there was a small hiccup. Calvin, for all his experience and maturity, was clumsy in a way that didn't match his age. Calvin was inexperienced. I stifled a laugh, and in a mix of embarrassment and frustration, Calvin bit my lower lip, looking up at me with wide eyes, and said, "Teach me." So I did. And then I learned the meaning of the phrase teaching your student too well. Chapter 23. The next day, Alicia invited me for a girls' tea party and casually asked me how last night went. Her eyes were sharp, and I hadn't intended to hide anything from her anyway. I didn't need to. I thought for a moment, better than any man I've ever been with. Alicia clicked her tongue. With your stamina, you two are really a perfect match. I laughed and graciously accepted the compliment. Logically, after the engagement, the wedding should be the next thing to plan. But I had reached a new phase in my career. My company was sending me to the North American headquarters for a year of training. It was an incredible opportunity, and more importantly, it would advance my career even further. I had been preparing for the China Regional Director role for a long time. In this regard, two mature people like Calvin and I didn't need to have a long discussion. We both knew instinctively to delay the wedding. Time flowed by in a series of kisses and embraces. As the year came to an end, Calvin's company held their annual gala, and President Wang himself wrote an invitation letter asking me to attend. Calvin's core team was close to him, and they all recognized me. When I arrived, I received an exceptionally warm welcome. After all, I was quite generous. Calvin's secretary told me that in their internal group chat, they had nicknamed me the wealth spreader. At the end of the evening, Calvin stepped onto the stage to give his speech amidst applause. He talked about the company's achievements over the past year and its vision for the future. Calvin rarely gave generic speeches. His pace was steady, his tone warm, and his words genuine, making the speech both inspiring and heartfelt. After finishing business talk, Calvin shifted the conversation, still in front of the applause. Over the past year, I've entered a new stage in my life by getting engaged to the person I love. I froze, and the crowd began to buzz with excitement. At every major turning point in my life, I've always been grateful to myself for my persistence and my refusal to give up. Calvin smiled softly. But from now on, I'll only be grateful to the most important person in my life, Miss Chloe Lee, the chief designer of this company." The crowd erupted into cheers, and every eye turned to me. My world was once covered in ice, barren and desolate, Calvin said, his gaze focused solely on me. "But because of you, the glaciers have melted, and flowers now bloom everywhere." The noise around me faded away, and all I could see were Calvin's tender eyes.